Good morning. I'm Walt Bartman, and I'm the founder and director of the Yellow Barn Studio at Glen Echo. And we are doing a series of interviews of our instructors, mainly for you to get to know exactly who is teaching at the Yellow Barn, and you'll find your instructor. The instructor that we're going to have today interviewed is Marcy Wolf Hubbard, and she's been teaching at the Yellow Barn for a number of years. But she's been teaching. She has a long career in teaching, and I think uh, what's important for this in this interview is for you to get to know exactly who she is, and we'll we're going to just ask her a few questions this morning, and then you'll get to know, all right, who Marcy is. Like I said, she brings a long career of teaching and painting and a lot of knowledge. So she's a master of what she does, and most of the instructors, you know, uh, that are on these interviews, I mean, really communicate, where they've been and their backgrounds, and I think that's exactly what we want to do is get to know them. So, good morning, Marcy. How are you?
Good morning. I'm good. Good to see you, and happy to be here.
Yeah. But one of the things we're going to do right now, just maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background.
Okay. Let's see. I've always loved to draw, so I've drawn since I was very young, and I guess I got into painting maybe more towards high school, I guess. But I'm from Baltimore, and I went to the Maryland Institute and also the University of Maryland, and I studied illustration. So I think that included design, and I'll probably jump around if you ask me about these things. But anyway, something I have found is the design plays a lot into my collage. And I love including my drawing and collage and painting. And you see, I work in encaustic. So, and I'm happy to be one of the artists, the teaching artists at Yellow Barn. I think that there's a great group of artists there. So, anyway.
Well, how did you start when you were young? How did your career start?
Okay. Well, like I say, always doing drawing, and I think it was one of my mother's friends said, "Oh, she should take lessons." And there was a woman in my neighborhood, Janet Saltzman. I mean, I was like 10 or whatever, and I just went to her, and it really, I feel like it pushed me. I was just a kid, but it was very serious, these classes. So I just kept with her and through school, and then, but I guess mainly drawing.
Okay, so how long have you been teaching?
I'm thinking maybe it's been about 20 years, more since like 2005. I think I was starting also to work with artists in healthcare because I also am the I work with Arts for the Aging. I work with seniors and seniors with dementia, but working in the schools. And then maybe it's been more so the past 10 years working more with adults. And
And you sort of focused on, I think, a dimension of as far as the different mediums. You're known as an encaustic artist and a mixed media artist, right?
right, right. In caustic, it's kind of like painting with oils in a way. And you can see I have in my studio, the palette is my griddle, where I use the griddle like my palette. So that's painting, but I combine my drawings with the painting.
And the can you speak a little bit about the process?
Yeah, and you'll see when you bring up the artwork, many times I work with my drawings. It could be the figure, nature, and I would adhere the drawing, choose one that I want to take further into a painting, and mount it on wood and embed it in the encaustic medium. And encaustic is beeswax and Damar resin.
Mhm.
So that combination is the medium, and I'm and sometimes encapsulating it, but keeping the figure, so you see the drawing of it, like say charcoal drawing. Also more with nature, you'll see kind of painting in layers. A lot has to do with the layers and building, and I think of it like a construction. And there's also a lot of back and forth. So maybe with mixed media as well, a lot of back and forth. So.
What were your influences?
Well, I guess I always think of Larry Rivers and his drawing and the expression or the freedom to it, the energy of it. I do like John Alexander a lot with his painterly ways. I more lately, I think, kind of keeping it simple in the drawing and really having that connection. So, like Matisse in the figure, and just, I guess, kind of noticing like line quality in some of these artists also.
Yeah. And you're one of the few that teaches in caustic in the Washington area, aren't you?
There's a few of us.
Uh-huh. But that's what I'm saying. It's a small number of instructors, and we're lucky to have you. I think this is one of the uh, things that I can say about the Yellow Barn. We try to have a variety of approaches and diverse approaches to philosophy and art. And so, how would you see philosophically your work?
I guess you could say that I'm kind of using the materials to try to be, it kind of lessens the, oh, I don't know, I'm not sure how to say it, but so I can be expressive, take what I can from these materials. But so you're talking about like philosophy of my work
Yeah,
or,
I think when I look at you, I see you're a, an artist that really uses abstraction and representation. You blend them together, and the material is what speaks in your work. And I think that when
yeah.
you look at the way you use encaustic, it isn't like you use it like other people do. You have your own real approach to it, and the I think the expressive and emotional qualities that you bring to your work, I think, are your strength. When I look at your work, where some other artists would be descriptive, for instance, I see you not being a descriptive artist. You give us enough information to understand things. You give us the essence of the idea, but you don't, overwhelm us with too much um, confusion and decoration. You really are right to the point in your work, and it speaks beautifully. And I loved your work. I mean, I think the pieces that you've produced and what I've seen really, has inspired me because I think that you have that ability to be, in a way, personal too. I think the work really reflects your own personality, and I think you're sensitive to that, and you bring that to your students. I think not that you make them be like you, but I think you give them the opportunity to be a little bit more creative, and I think that's what I see too. I see you as a very creative person. You're exploring, which
Mhm.
means you're experimenting.
I would
You
say
know,
that too.
yeah. So these are the elements that I think I see as your strength. Um, and for me, having you on the faculty, that makes such a difference. Because we need that kind of diversity, and this way it gives students the opportunity to pick and choose artists to study with. They may think they need a really strong drawing course at one time, and then they need an expressive coarse than another. And caustic really is a dimension to all, even all oil painters and acrylic painters, watercolors, and so on, that they should think in terms of not just being wedded to one medium, but being able to use these different varieties of mediums, and use certainly bring that to the work. So I think I'm happy with that.
It's kind of like how you move the paint, and that is expressive. But you were saying something about realistic abstraction, and I remember that one of my instructors, Philip Koch from the Institute, I think he's had that term in like taking the essence of what you
Mhm.
see in your painting, and I kind of relate to that. So interesting that you said that realistic abstraction, maybe,
Yeah,
and I
you have this certain element of representation, and then I'm the same way. I feel that
yeah.
the material is important. I feel you're expressing an idea in whatever material you're working with,
Mhm.
understanding that that's the language, and how you use that language. And I feel you communicate that very, very well. I also, when we talk in terms of the nature of, you know, trying to put together an idea, and if we look at English as a sentence, we have descriptive words and we have totally abstract words where we just like is, why, and the, which we can't explain, but they're important in constructing an idea. And I feel that we both share that. I think we bring those elements to the work. Um, the uh, so what we're going to do now is, go on and just take a look at your work and give you a chance to speak about your work. And I think this way, people will get to know you as an artist. So here we go. You should be seeing this shared screen here in a second. You seeing the PowerPoint?
I do.
Okay.
Right.
So
It's
we're
at the
ready.
end.
We're
Yeah.
ready to go here. We're going to start from the beginning.
Okay.
Okay. And the first piece, do you want to speak about it?
Okay. Yeah, this is one where you can see the charcoal drawing. And actually, I was visiting my friend Leah McDonald, who I've co-taught with before. She works in encaustic. I met her at a residency that we both had a little more than 2 years ago in Kentucky, at Encaustic Castle. So anyway, she had a friend visiting, and she said, "Oh, Callie, I'll model for you." And so this is in Leia's studio. She has interesting furniture, dresses, masks, costume, whatever. And I like this. I think this is fun, and this is in encaustic. So you see the charcoal drawing, and you see the painting in encaustic. And when I look at it, I mean, it might look like if someone's familiar with painting with a palette knife, you can get texture. But this is just the buildup of the encaustic paint and drawing into it. But it's simple, but I like the feel of it
Hmm.
anyway.
And if you were to look at yourself as an artist and say, okay, what period of art would you be wedded to? Do you have any of those influences, or, do you see your signature being similar to, say, other artists?
Well, I guess the impressionists
Okay. And
appeal to me.
why do you see that? Why do you see that?
Um, I guess that the atmosphere, that just the feel that you get from the working with paint and the colors, what it can do for you. So, again, not photorealistic, but just getting the mood, the
Hmm.
atmosphere.
Yeah, this is a beautiful piece. I really like the piece because of the color. All right. I mean, that's the thing that blue really just grabs you, and you're getting the most out of that blue, because of the way you've orchestrated the other elements. Um, I find your signature to be this charcoal outline that you tend to employ, and the reason I asked you about what period is because, I see, like, for instance, even though, you mentioned Matisse, um, there's an angularity to your work too at the same time, and you know, that expresses, I think, a certain element of tension, which is very interesting how you bring that to the work as well. But this piece really, it gets you to look at it, and I think the shapes particularly are very interesting. So the so we'll move on to the next one. Unless do you have anything else you want to say about this one
It's,
before we?
well, shapes, I'm more interested, or I'm thinking a lot about the positive and negative space, and so what's around it, the colors, the areas of color, I think about.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you can see that in your work, and you can see your experience too, and I think that's important as well. The next piece,
So this was a charcoal drawing, and I just felt like I wanted to use this drawing, and I have her in an environment that is actually from when I visited a friend in North Bend, Washington State, where they filmed Twin Peaks, and you can see the Twin Peaks in the background.
yeah,
So it's just, I feel like it's kind of delicate in the foreground with the leaves, and I'm drawing with the incising tool, drawing into the wax. And anyway, so there is a there's a way that I'm fitting the figure there, but it's a lot about the environment as well. So in the charcoal drawing, I just wanted to keep like that. I don't generally go over the figure with a pigment
right,
unless it's the oil sticks giving it a tone. So anyway, so it ends up being a landscape.
yeah. Talk a little bit about the design.
Well, I maybe it's just that how she's looking back. It's you're focused on the figure, but then there's I feel like a beautiful landscape with the color behind, and I'm looking at the some of the reflection, the color, how they hit each other with the water, but then having that detail up front. I guess looking at it, I notice the leaves a lot, and just the kind of, you can be delicate, the drawing of the leaves. So
Mhm.
it's a little kind of faded in the background, and you can accomplish that with the encaustic, how you handle the heat.
Yeah. The interesting thing for me too is the scale. The fact that the figures, you know, large and actually, you know, is overlapping the landscape, and the focus is on the essentially the figure, but you can't help but focus on the color of the landscape. So you really create a nice contrast. I feel the design works beautifully. The repetition in the design, and you know, like you said, having her turn back into the space, her pose. You know, how did you pick her pose?
Well, this was one of our models, and I just went ahead and drew it. So among many others, and I just decided I like that. I like how she's turning back, and we just, it's kind of like a little bit dark over her shoulder on the right. And I don't know. Now looking at it, like here, I have it in my home, the painting, but now looking at it like on the screen, it's like, wow, it looks like she's coming out of the water. So anyway, maybe also because it's like not so much definition, her left leg, or it's sort of I left the more of the charcoal, that not any hard edge.
Yeah, there's a movement, you
Hmm.
know, in the
But
lower torso, there's a movement. So you really get the feeling that you know, she's coming toward us. And
mhm.
the other thing though is that she's looking back at the
Right.
same time. And philosophically or psychologically, I think that's a strong element, you know, that it communicates a connection between the viewer and the image. And I think you do that exceptionally well here in this piece. The next piece, you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, this I did earlier in the quarantine. I had some doll clothes and I started painting the clothes and then yeah, because I have used the doll clothes just to draw from before, but this time I was painting them also. So I I guess I thinking about it, maybe thinking about simpler times, but um I would say that just kind of here we were at home and I would inward or thinking back or so, and I like these two together also. Anyway, in the brightness, that one on the right is like a little old ratty nightgown, doll clothes. I mean, these are vintage, all of them. That was kind of interesting. So for me, like handling these and just looking at them and placing them and positioning together. So,
Yeah, and this one does have that impressionist kind of quality about
mhm,
it, mainly because you don't, the impressionists didn't really draw very much. I mean, we know Degas kind of as an impressionist, and he used a lot of line, but the Monet and that group of artists, Sisley, um, Pizarro, they didn't really outline or draw as much, and this has that quality about it. It's less drawing,
mhm.
which I think the form is there, of course, and the use of the colors to develop that kind of dimension is really working. But those combinations really um, make you really want to look at this piece. And the more and more that I look at your work, there is that sensitivity to color palettes. Okay, that I think is really important to understand. Can you speak about that in the way you work? Because you're not using the same colors over and over again. At least I'm not seeing it that way.
Right. Sometimes I mean, I have, maybe I'm branching out a little, but just I'm looking that actually the dress was like really red and green in the plaid, and maybe I was making the greens more like a turquoise or just kind of pushing it like that. But, thinking about the complementary colors and also the lights and darks in there and just like how I'm moving the brush
Mhm.
over across it. So like the white, I'm kind of zooming in on the right side of that plaid dress and the whites going horizontal. And sometimes I think about that, the horizontal, vertical, things like that. Anyway, and the edge, say the edge where the red is next to the blue or the angles within, thinking about how the colors are next to each other
Yeah,
too.
this is interesting because when you're talking this way now, you can see that abstract thinking.
Hmm.
I mean that's what you're communicating here. The it's an interesting piece for me. And again, I was going to ask you about the palettes. What colors are you using? I mean, do you have a set of colors that you work with, or do you change those colors? Do you see yourself using different palettes?
I mean, I do. These are, I'm probably using more of blue colors here and leaning towards turquoise. Some greens I stay away from. But the shadows are that almost like a gray, purple, bluish tones. And so it's not so foreign from the actual object I'm drawing. You could say that.
So
And
what colors do you put out on your palette?
oh, well, I can, right here. I guess I'm using the ultramarine blue, um, sometimes some of the cadmium reds, yellows, and the encaustic paint, there's different varieties of blues that I kind of, there's some.
So when you buy encaustic paints, they're different than the oil paint?
They are, yeah, they're just like, well, here, I just happen to have this one. Yeah, this is the ultramarine blue, and I use a lot of this alizarin orange, and there's alizarin crimson with the red, and I stay away from black because I'm going to be toning it with one of these other colors. But yeah, certain turquoises, I do like that they sell. I like the R&F brand.
So where do you get your paints?
I might go either to Plaza or order online.
Hmm.
And when I'm preparing for a class, I sometimes I'm picking colors that I may not use normally because I not everyone has my palette. We are mixing colors, or I'm mixing colors, but still, just some people have more of a desire to use some kind of pink or things like that. Even
Right.
black, but I say I tend to mix it if I'm going to go dark with it. Um, and I always tell the students, like, be careful when you're mixing colors. Greens, it for me, it kind of it tends to take over. So for me, I have to be careful, or maybe I'll go more with the yellows and controlling.
How about the when you're working with uh, your palette, um, do you I had a question I wanted to ask you. Do you find that your colors, there are certain colors you need to stay away from?
Yeah, the green, unless it's this color green gold, I do like a lot. But and with the encaustic, working on the griddle, you don't have to clean it. And people work in different ways. Other encaustic painters might have a can with a certain brush for certain colors, but I mix right there on the griddle. So again, you don't have to clean it. So I kind of do go back to the colors that I like. So if I look over here, I see a lot kind of verging from that alizarin orange, and maybe I am adding some white into it. And I always, like you see the background here is this white. I might go with this cloudy white, I call it, where it's white that's more transparent, and then kind of build up and adding a tone later. I also use the oil stick to bring other color into it.
Yeah.
So, and for that, definitely I have my go-to colors.
Now,
Like,
for a beginning student, would they have to be very careful not to make mud?
um,
Is that a challenge to keep
I
colors from
what
mixing together?
it's first of all, you do like in a class, you do want to keep some of the areas separate on the palette. And mud, I mean, you can always test your colors. It's
Okay,
I don't know.
so
I think just having the other colors around, you can. I do show them how to mix it and not put too much of one. So you might start with a couple colors and then take a small amount on your brush from one, move it into a separate area. So you're not mixing mud. I think of if you do a
right,
whole.
that's what I'm thinking. That all of a sudden, because this is it melts on the griddle essentially, so it's spreading out, and you have to keep these colors separate. You do a great job of doing that. Your
Oh,
colors are so fresh and so vibrant, and I'm thinking to myself that's something you learn to master, I guess, as you're working. What kind of references? We'll go to the next one. What kind of references do you use to make your work?
well, I guess I do work from photographs, especially now. Like that's drawing some of the horses, and I found some copyright-free sites, Pixabay. That's nice to just look through. There is more open access also for um,
Well, let me ask you a
images.
question. You mentioned the copyright. Um, you're not copying their work. So and you're redesigning the piece. So why would you worry about the copyright? Is there a reason that you would do that?
Um, it's it can be a gray area because you don't, right, I'm making it my own and
Yeah.
I'm taking the essence of it. And when I'm working and working with students, I'm encouraging them to make it their own. They're looking at the photo or and kind of what they take from it.
Mhm.
But yeah, more so also if people are, well, I'm thinking of the collage mixed media, and then I'm painting over, obliterating. But my background in illustration, I did the obliterating, painting over, things like
Yeah.
that.
I
So,
just wondered. I wondered what when we work from sources. I guess students, working from their own source is probably the key. But if you have to use other images, there's so many different ways of appropriating things, and Picasso addressed that. So I think that the those are just things that we deal with. This particular piece, do you want to speak anything? Tell us about this piece particularly?
well, this is I made it not that long ago, and I was actually demonstrating some of the drawing with my students at the time, and just deciding I'd like to combine some of these horses and see how it is if I add to the left. And that's why you see that seam there, because I thought, no, I want to keep those in it. So I went larger, and it just felt right. Like they're all kind of heading. I call this follow the horses.
Hmm.
They're charcoal drawings and then collaged. And I did use acrylic, so painting in acrylics over some of the charcoal, and that kind of makes it like painterly. But here, relying on the shapes and how the shape defines the horses, but also that movement.
Hmm.
So anyway, you can see things like in the foreground, they're actually silk flowers that I painted over, or leaves that I do as working in mixed media. I will kind of be like a scavenger and add found objects, maybe to make it's interesting with different textures also. So you see that in here. And like I tell students, and I go to well, or at times go to thrift stores, free cycle, and someone was getting rid of these silk flowers, and normally, not something that would interest me, but I thought, I wonder if I could paint over those, include it for the texture, other fabric. So that's mixed in there. And here it's, maybe I was talking before about avoiding greens. You can't always, anyway, it doesn't matter. But incorporating it into the painting, so painting over it, and then in the background, what I call these merge papers, collage papers, are just mixing the acrylics and then having that like as my palette to pull from. So in some of the mountains, other collage. And so it is kind of pieced together with these different collage elements.
Yeah, and this is very fascinating too. I mean, this is, for students to learn how to work with the multi materials, not always thinking that it's just wedded to one. Um, the uh, Monet or Degas particularly used a printing press and ran things through a printing press and then put pastel, did a monotype and then put pastel on top. And you have a number of artists that are using mixed media. And I think the fascinating thing here is this is a really feels like a very contemporary image, and it really has an abstract expressionist feel to it, where the paint and the surface becomes significant in the feeling of the work. Just the way you orchestrate that. Um, this is a favorite one of mine too because of the movement and the color combination as well. Though it's more realistic in some respects, less design, more representational in the kind of landscape, the feeling of the landscape and its dimension, and the scale relationships of the horses to the landscape. But yeah, this worked out really quite well. The next one.
Also, what I was going to say about the texture there, because I feel like I am building and I'm not satisfied with just some kind of thin paint. For me, I'm just the texture appeals to me, and I and I've mentioned before, building, constructing. So anyway, that was it. The layers helped me out.
And you find yourself taking away as much as putting on?
In this case, actually, I did some takeaway, and I had once in a while I'll do this with a collage. Take a photograph of the elements. I like it like this. I like this. I like that. And I felt like, well, maybe I lost something when I was putting it together, and I removed some of the paint. So there's more. There was some taking away in some of the mountains area. I wanted to keep it light up where the sky is.
Mhm. And then this particular piece.
Well, that's where I had the drawing. I something about this crow I really liked, and sort of highlighting him right there. Repurposed a wood tray. I hold on to things. I'm like, well, maybe I'll use this. So I went with a lot of those blues, and then it just seemed like, oh, also you see that vintage paint my by number in the upper left, like tearing it, and I felt like the blues that I had in it didn't work with that. So then I brought in more green tones, and here I'm using Caran d'Ache, the water soluble pastels, which is a good kind of, I don't know, shorthand way for me to draw, bring in that color, and then it actually is watercolor. So it brings a tone in on top of the acrylics. And plus you have the marks of the Caran d'Ache. So anyway, it's a lot of different pieces integrated, some things I've held on to. It's called Found. And there's some baseball leather there. You can see that. So there's some depth to it. Other strands of like metallic that I had, and just thinking like the bird in a nest, putting in objects. I'm doing that too. And I have, you can see on the right those feathers. That's actually from badminton, the birdie, those feathers
Mhm.
up on the right, and then some just above the bird there. And there's even in the left, the front on top is the bottom corner. I mean, um, painting on transparencies or acetate and some reverse glass painting. So these are different things I have and I pull from, and where the collage, the mixed media, that's like part of my palette. I want to add this here. I want to add that.
But
So,
what are you working on? You're not working on paper.
well, the charcoal drawing was on paper, but then I had prepared this wood tray. So it looks like a frame, but it was an old tray. And that's my support. That's the surface.
But
So,
but there's encaustic in here, right? So you
you
had to have,
know, it's acrylic mainly, but if you look above the upper right area, and I have some of those feathers, I have a small amount, those horizontal strips, brush strokes. That's actually from when I test my brush in encaustic. I just like, maybe it was near me, and I like those colors with it, so I included that. Normally, you would not mix acrylic with encaustic, but all this is on this just collage onto the surface.
yeah, uh, I find this fascinating because it's feels like an encaustic, even though you said it's an acrylic, which is very interesting. The way that you're able to bring that to in both pieces. I would have thought of this as an encaustic. All right. So, and a lot of it has to do with your drawing and the layering and that I think that the process, I guess, that you would use in encaustic. It feels like you've brought that to this particular piece. Um, yeah, this is you want to speak about the designing because of the frame of the tray. I guess did that have an influence on how you designed the piece?
It did. It was kind of like, I mean, and I'm not one to really work with circles anyway, but this is like, here it is, a square. Right in the center is this bird. So it just seemed to fit there. But other things about this, I like how I've painted around those feathers in the back and kind of integrating that drawing with all the background and the color and just the space in between, things like that. But you said it may have reminded you of encaustic. Maybe it's the texture
Mhm.
also and like the layers. I do have the kind of like vintage old horticulture book or gardening book, flowers, and right coming up from on the top. So that goes top to the inside. And I'm painting around that. So incorporating that as collage.
But you don't start with a plan. You really are just you're kind of intuitively placing these things relative to one another just by the fact that you have them nearby and you feel that you're designing elements to create an idea. Is that how you tend to work?
It is, but also like including like I wouldn't have been happy with it until I just added more of the drawing into it, like with the stems or the branch and having it work together and then doing more drawing over the bird. So it is the mixture in a way, mixing these materials that you're right, didn't have a definite plan here.
You don't really work with a plan, do you? Maybe the horses were more of a plan, but this seems to be like one where you would have just, uh, when you put one thing down, you find something else relative to it, and then you kind of build on an idea. But what's really interesting is you really create a narrative here, and you create from my point of view, a very poetic idea. All right, and so it's interesting how your mind is evolving and creating an idea. All right, because some people will plan things out, others will discover,
Mhm.
and in a way you get that feeling that there's a naturalness to this and building, and this the way our minds work. you know our minds don't work backward where we see the idea and then try to figure it out. Though that's how mathematics works. All right, but really, truthfully, the way our minds work is we start with an idea and it kind of leads us to something else. You know, and I feel that's what your work is. And so you there's a lot of authenticity here. I mean, a personal signature feels very contemporary. Okay, the way we're thinking now about things. I feel this is one of the strengths of your work too. Um, Speak about the drawing.
Okay, now this is a self-portrait, which is it's kind of funny. I was demonstrating, and this was actually this was the spring drawing class, and doing a lot and really, and I tell the students draw with your arm and really trust your eye. And I was looking in a mirror, and it's moving my hand, and it's just that movement is what made it. And I don't know if it looks like me, it feels like it has personality, but just even those little marks. And I have a video and I can see how I just went back and I did this or that, and it just, that's it.
Yeah,
So, but I must have done I did several.
yeah. This has that feeling of Matisse. Matisse had that same quality, and you're not really working big, but you
No,
have a rhythm that is much more from the shoulder than it is from the wrist. In other words, usually when we talk in terms of people who are really particularly graphic at things, perhaps maybe more descriptive, they're going to be working much more from the wrist. Whereas you
right.
have a fluidity that I think is, lends itself to like the Asian Asian influences. Did you have any? Do you look at Asian art at all when you're as far as your work is concerned? Is that anything that you other cultures? Do you look at other cultures' work?
I don't know, not I guess I wouldn't say that, but I do feel a little bit of like the Asian feel to that one with the Twin Peaks
Hmm.
in that setting, the design, the colors, the simplicity. But no, I guess I wouldn't say that. But with the quarantine, I am looking more on at other artists and sharing these artists with my students and discovering and just experimenting more also here
Yeah.
at home.
Well, this is, you can see the experience here in the line. And that's what I'll say. And I think that's one of the things about particularly Chinese brush painting. There's an experience to the movement. It isn't like somebody's just kind of scratching away. It has and I think when you get into your encaustics too, you have that particular feel with those dark lines. So here's another. This I guess this would be an acrylic painting, would it not? Or
Right. It's acrylic. It's actually I used water soluble graphite on mylar, and you can see even lines behind it because this is like from an engineer's drawings. A previous student had given me all this. He was an engineer, and I just kind of cut it up and worked on that. So but back to that other one, I'm sorry, some things you were saying about the drawing. I feel like, and I try to get across to the students, trust, I say it, and I said this, trust your eye, and you can get a confident with it. And also how hard you will press down on the paper, that's something else. That's what I like about compressed charcoal, what you can do with the line
yeah,
quality.
this is it captures, like we said, the essence. It's not all about description. You're giving us elements of line that are the descriptive element, but it's more emotional, and it has a lot to do with speed,
Mhm.
and elements like that. The This particular piece,
Yeah. So anyway, I've got the brush stroke in there. And so this was pretty quick. And so just how I'm moving the brush, conveying the body of the bird and the feathers and the direction, moving the paint and a little bit light, dark, like in the face, but liking that background orange here. A
I
little
do too.
drawing in the paint. So I did a loose drawing with the graphite and then came in with acrylic, did a little scraping away.
Yes, sir.
Building, I guess you could see there's yellow behind it, so maybe I have a couple layers of
It's a
paint.
nice, simple piece, but it's right to the point, and the dynamics of color, I think, again, speaks strongly. This is one of the things that you do. And then this particular piece,
Well, this, Kat, a trans woman, she has modeled for us before, and
hmm
she's just wonderful. So I have that here. She had one shoe on, one shoe off, late for the party, I think I call this. And so I'm leaving my charcoal drawing as it is. I just painted her the shoes. I love that pink color here. And I had the a dress from thrift store, cut it up. I just felt like this is where I want it. But the setting is kind of came about from looking at old landscapes and postcards and integrating that. So here she's got this background, nature, and even there's a figure in one of the cards. You can see at the upper left, some still left. So I'm painting over the postcards, but integrating it in with this encaustic. So it's all collage, mixed media, encaustic
yeah. And,
background.
really truthfully, you can see the expressionistic quality in your work. I know you say impressionistic, but when you get to some of these poses and you get to the color combinations and you use the line, all right, like this particular piece, much more expressionistic in the way it feels, and that's powerful. So I think you do that well. And then this particular piece,
This was a charcoal drawing that I ended up working in collage. I had another part of the vintage paint by number, and kind of maybe it has this nostalgic feel because I've got these old papers with it, but the contrast with the grays and the charcoal drawn over these other backgrounds and other colors, a little bit of color in the background.
You can see how you play with ideas. I think this is one of the keys. If someone wanted to take your course, they would really be, you'd be able to teach them to play and enjoy creating instead of, I mean, you have the courage to just make ideas out of anything, and in a way, beginning students sometimes think they have to learn how to draw particularly really well, and they need to be able to shade, and they need to be able to do this and do that. But honestly, this is the first place to start, is just being able to understand what it is to make an idea, and then I know people always feel like they don't have all the tools perhaps, but that's, you don't really concern yourself with that, do you?
No, I think what I'm trying to get across to students is just have fun with it, explore, experiment, see what happens. So a freedom
Yeah, I
to
think
do that.
you give that, and I think that's a dimension that I feel, you know, uh, with this interview, students that don't, or anyone that doesn't know you is going to be able to really get a really good feel for where you're coming from. I think this is a beautiful piece, and again, you can see your design sense. You were talking about design in the beginning. Frank Benson, I remember saying, design, design, design. That's all you should say to yourself as you're making a piece of artwork, is just what's the design, you know? And I think that this is one of the things you communicate very strongly, is your ability to orchestrate shape, color, texture, patterns. They're all there in your work. And speaking of this as a very naturalistic piece, there is some representation here, but at the same time, it's more about surfaces and colors and shapes. And like I said, the essence of an idea. You really get to the point, and we feel it. And then this is the last piece, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, this one actually was I was drawing these orchids. And I guess I was using a photo reference in this case because there was an exhibit at the American Art Museum in the Co-God atrium a couple years ago. So I had a lot of nice pictures. So I did a drawing and then watercolor and mounted it onto wood, and it's embedded in the medium. So this is encaustic. I feel like I was really noticing the shapes and the space around it, the negative space. And um, I always say here is like, wow, I was not really fond of it until I brought in that orange, and then really liking it. And the white flowers, got a little bit of difference here, differentiation with a little bit of pink tones, but the orange makes me see the shapes better and kind of brings more prominence to these flowers, I feel,
Yeah,
having
you
that
really,
background.
you got the right value, color combination, design. Everything here works beautifully. The shape of the rectangle, when we talk in terms of putting something on a rectangle and whether it feels natural, this really does really work beautifully. I think, this, summing up your work, this is a good piece to end with because of its, uh, just, it culminates in what students can see what they can do, and the kind of subjects that you work with, the variety of subjects. These are all beautiful pieces, Marcy. I think that's it. So, with in ending this right now, just want to say that if you're interested in really taking Marcy's class, you want to register through the Yellow Barn Studio, yellowbarnstudio.com. She's offering uh, I guess, a mixed media workshop. What date is it?
The last Sunday of the month, I guess I'm thinking it's the 24th, and then Monday, the 25th. So these are individual workshops,
Yeah.
drawing, and then collage and painting.
But you'll do things throughout the year now, and I think that's look, go to the website, and to follow you. Okay, I think that would be so they can see what courses you're offering. Okay, with that, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to be with us and share with us all the, what you're about, which I think is it's just so incredible the dimension that you bring to your work and how you communicate to your students. And I know the students really like working with you, and looking forward to um, you know them signing up and taking your class.
Thank
So
you. Well, it was really great to talk to you and wonderful.
yeah,
So,
this was wonderful to be able to just catch up. All right, well, take care,
you
and
too.
we'll be talking. All right,
Okay,
bye bye.
thanks.